Hello, everybody. Welcome in this beautiful venue. We're in the turbine hall of the Elektriciteitsfabriek, and Douglas Rushkoff is about to give his keynote. But before he's starting his keynote, I'd like to introduce to you our Deputy Mayor of Culture, Robert van Asten, to tell a little bit about his view on culture in The Hague and this festival. Deputy Mayor Robert van Asten.
Art lovers, music lovers, curious people, partners and dear friends of today's art. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Hague, city of peace and justice, city of cybersecurity and creative industries. First, let me congratulate Today's Art with its 15th anniversary. 15 years of music, art and creativity. 15 years of media art, mind-blowing interventions, immersive installations and electronic music. What started as a new pioneer in unveiled disciplines now has become a mastodon in the field of festivals for digital culture. In 15 years, the world has changed tremendously. 15 years ago, in the year 2004, the social network called Hives was launched in the Netherlands, all known from the famous Krabbelen. In the US, something similar happened. The Facebook started, a nice tool to connect with your friends and family. 15 years later, this tool is now connecting 2 billion people worldwide, knowing more about our behavior than we do ourselves. How do we relate to these digital developments? It's not only an interesting question, it's highly relevant. We need to know it's about society. Today's Art is the kind of festival to address current and upcoming technological matters and their meaning for our daily life. Not only by discussing them in a context program with panels and keynote speakers, but also by artistic reflection, by bringing artists, philosophers, a worldwide network of engaged people to The Hague. And that's exactly what's happening here these 4 days. Because we're now on the brink of a new era, or in the middle of a transition. Whatever we're in, it requires awareness, consciousness. There's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness in each of us, said David Lynch when he was asked about human capabilities. In that ocean of consciousness, it is what we are exploring by art and culture. And as Deputy Mayor, I'm responsible for a vital and lively cultural life in the beautiful city of The Hague. And what a rich landscape of art we have today. You might have noticed in the city center that we're actually building something new. In 2021, it will be the new stage of the city, a home for the Hague Philharmonic, the National Dance Theatre and the Royal Conservatoire, a unique building filled with artistic energy, and that all in the heart of the city of The Hague. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate art for 4 days. It started yesterday evening. The city is buzzing. Big installation here in the turbine hall of the Elektriciteitsfabriek. An exhibition to travel for. Mind-blowing work. It only be seen here in The Hague. Audiovisual performances and music in the Theater aan Spui in the city center, and 2 club nights in Het Paard. Not to mention several other venues like Galerie Het Nest and Grey Space in the middle. Immersive experiences and good energy rooting in this festival theme, consciousness. You've kicked off elaborating this afternoon, but saved a prime time slot. And now we're here. So, I'm very proud to announce your keynote speaker of today, one of the world's most influential thought leaders, Mr. Douglas Rushkoff. I wish you all a beautiful, inspiring, and unforgettable 2 Days Art Festival. And Mr. Rushkoff, the floor is all yours.
Thanks. I love my background music. It's so foreboding. That's funny. Yeah, who was it that was talking about psychedelics before? He was sitting over there. Where'd he go? Oh, well. Oh, there you are. Yeah, so that's when I decided I should actually, especially if I'm in Holland, I should talk about psychedelics. It's part of the culture, right? Okay. I remember when digital technology and psychedelics were kind of the same thing. Now, I learned about them together. I learned about them at Timothy Leary's house. He was a early LSD pioneer. And I remember we put him on the web for the first time, on the Mozilla browser, I guess it was, or Mosaic. And he was clicking around, then he said, "Oh my God, this is acid." Right? So this is as powerful as LSD, only people don't have to ingest a chemical to get it. And I think he was right, that digital technology is as powerful as acid. But one thing Timothy Leary used to say about LSD was what determines the quality of your trip is your set and setting. Right? It's not just the drug, it's the mindset that you have when you take it. In other words, what am I going to do? What's my purpose? And the setting that you're doing it in, right? The environment that you're doing it in. Now, the internet in the US, anyway, I think most of the world, and digital technology, has a set and setting of extractive surveillance capitalism. That's the set and setting of the internet and of digital technology. So no wonder 25 years in that trip, we are having such a bad trip. Right? It's look at America right now. That's the best way I could describe it is bad trip. Right? I could shout, oh, there he is. So you talk about bad trips there. It's them. It's them. But you watch people basically finding a trailhead, going down a rabbit hole of paranoia, and ending up in these bizarre miscommunications. And the oddly enough, the people having the worst trip of all are, I think, the people who are the most successful in this digital business landscape. I had this harrowing life experience last year when I was invited to do a talk about the digital future, and I was waiting to go on stage, sitting in the little green room, and instead of bringing me out onto the stage, they brought these 5 men in the green room with me, who turned out to be these tech billionaires who were peppering me with these questions about digital business and the digital future, and they were all binaries. It was Ethereum or Bitcoin, augmented reality or virtual reality, and then finally, Alaska or New Zealand. Because what these guys wanted to know, and the main thing that they wanted from me, was sort of almost white hat hacker testing of their post-apocalypse bunker strategies. They spent the rest of the hour on the single question, how do I maintain control of my security force after the event? Meaning their money is worthless, so how are the guards still going to protect them from us, right? From the unwashed masses, the radioactive social media, poverty, peasants running to their shelters for food. And I told them, try being nice to them now, right? That didn't go over so well. But what I realized was the problem here was these tech billionaires and our tech industry and really our society right now is they're looking at the world from the perspective of how much money do I need to earn in order to insulate myself from the reality that I'm creating by earning money in this way. right, which is insanity, right? That's the bad trip that they're on. And you can never earn enough money. It's like asking, how can I make a car that goes fast enough to escape from its own exhaust? Eventually, you'll come back around the other side of the world and be back in your exhaust. But they don't understand it that way. It's a straight line. We were talking a little about that during the panel this afternoon, this notion of progress, as if you go from here to there, and this stuff doesn't exist anymore because it's somehow in the past. But there is no in the past. It comes back. It comes back in some other form, right? You don't have to get religious to understand karma is real. We're here. And the fact that these folks are turning to a media theorist for strategies on surviving the apocalypse is also kind of strange. Right? It's as if they understand that they're missing something. Right? So that's the question I sort of want to dive into, is how do the most supposedly powerful technological titans of our time experience themselves as utterly powerless to do anything to change the future? That the best they can do is hire, statisticians or machine learning algorithms to predict the future and then prepare for it. So technology is not about opening new possibilities for them. It's about figuring out what's going to happen. It's about predictive analysis. And once you treat life and everything from the perspective of predictive analysis, what you're really going to try to do with your technology is make people more predictable. And that's a dead end. Literally, that's the dead end, to make human beings more like robots, more like, not even, like bad robots. And it's strange to me. So I come back here and see the lights and see, did you see the swirling one behind the thing? You got to look at that with this. And I see that, and I'm reminded of where this stuff started, of where the digital renaissance was this moment. Maybe it was like 2 weeks long, but it was a moment where rave culture and digital technology and the psychedelics revival and computers and fractals and quantum physics and video games and fantasy role-playing and hypertext and chaos math, they were all about extending what it meant to be human, right? And enhancing the human potential and human connectivity. There was this sense that we were moving into a designer reality that would only be limited by what we could imagine, right? Not virtual reality as some simulation, some high-def simulation of a football game, but virtual reality as a way of me sharing my dream with you, my vision, where you could be in a space and literally see what I mean. Right? We don't need these words anymore. It's like somehow dancing in this shared space. And it was also unique, if you were around in the late 90s and for rave and these emergent cultures, in that it was like there was an agenda of no agenda, which in some ways was our strength and our weakness, right? We didn't want to be like punk. Punk was always about, fuck the queen or something, right? It was counter to the yuppie scum. But rave and digital and this psychedelic revival, we wouldn't have an agenda because that would be polarizing. That would be binary. It would just be inclusive and open and emergent. The problem was, by having no agenda, we made ourselves vulnerable to people with agendas. We really didn't understand. In rave, we didn't understand that the power of rave was not 120 beats per minute. The power of rave was that we were reclaiming public space for free public activity, that we were leaving the nightclubs and doing something out in the open. And digital likewise. Digital, we were reclaiming something about human connection and human possibility. I mean, it was so You got to really think back to the moment. But digital technology was originally rejected by business because they couldn't see a way of making money with it. The average internet-connected home in the early 90s in the United States was watching 9 hours less commercial television a week. And this was considered a problem. Oh my God, they're going to escape. They're going online. We can't make any money with them. They're just going to talk to each other. They're entertaining one another. They're not watching our commercials. This was a problem. Right? But over time, the internet became a business. Right? It became a means of social control. The internet would not be some big rave dance collective, right? The net would be business. I mean, my internet experience, my set and setting of the internet and digital culture was a magazine called Mondo 2000. I don't know if you remember that one. Originally it was called High Frontiers, which was just a psychedelics magazine. Then it was called Reality Hackers, which was supposed to combine the hacker mentality with sort of digital something. And then it was just Mondo 2000. We're moving into this world. And it had everyone from, Timothy Leary and Terence McKenna to Jaron Lanier and Eric Gullickson, the early VR pioneers, to William Gibson and Cyberpunk and Bruce Sterling. And it was, and Nick Herbert and quantum physicists looking at the conflux of events, all this stuff. It was like a weird curated a curated assortment of people who all believed that we are moving into a designer reality. And it was a weird era in Silicon Valley technology too, because the technology companies were hiring psychedelics people to be their developers. It was strange. It was as if only psychedelics people were comfortable hallucinating realities that would then come to pass, because they were building the landscape on which human beings would interact. Psychedelics users and children were good at doing that. And most grown-ups, people who had fixed understandings of what's possible, they were afraid to imagine an interface, to imagine a new space for human connection, to imagine these kinds of experience. It just seemed so weird. So Mondo was there to help people do pattern recognition and see in that sort of Gödel, Escher, and Bach way that this is all connected. Something's happening to human civilization. There's a possibility here. Then around 1993, in the middle of this San Francisco craziness, this unprofitable countercultural explosion of activity, came Wired magazine. And Wired magazine reframed the net. It reframed all of these social phenomena as a market opportunity. Wired basically said that thanks to the internet and digital technology, the stock market will grow exponentially forever. That's what they said. They even did a book called The Long Boom. That was one of their cover stories, The Long Boom. And everybody bought in. Oh, we're in a new paradigm. The chairman of the Federal Reserve in the US said, that's it. Now the economy can just grow forever. So the agenda of the net changed from expressing human possibility to really, well, we all know the big turn around the year 2000 with when Google decided to use all of our data rather than just to advertise to us. The net itself pivoted toward a more market-friendly opportunity, which was surveillance and control. It even wouldn't have been so bad. I know we used to complain about banner ads and all that. That wouldn't have been as bad as this. Once it was decided that the net would be about making money and social control, all the words we used to describe successful internet properties changed. Wired said we're living in an attention economy. That's what they called it. Because the real estate online is infinite, but there's only so much human time that we can spend looking at the screens. So they came up with a metric for that. I don't know if you remember it. It was called eyeball hours. That was the metric of how many hours human eyeballs are looking at your website. And what you were supposed to do was make your website or your app, you were supposed to make it sticky. That was the word they used for a good way. It's sticky, meaning the eyeballs are stuck to this web page. I can't get away, I'm stuck. It's like fly paper. Do you have fly paper here? You know that I'm stuck. And that's a good thing. And mathematically, if you will, we moved from the net being about opening up new possibilities to about prediction, right? To making people more predictable so we can bet on them, right? If you're speculating on the net, then what do you want to be able to do? You want to be able to make a certain bet. I want to be able to bet on the future. I don't want to see what future can happen. I want it to be certain so I can make my 10x or my 100x. And I'd rather have a bad future that I can bet on successfully than a good one that I don't know what the heck, I don't know how to make my money on it. And that's what we're designing. I remember the moment that I saw this was the day that Netscape was the popular originally non-profit browser. The day that Netscape went public, that they had their IPO, was the same day that Jerry Garcia died, the guitarist for the Grateful Dead. And I put these two events together in my head as, okay, now the internet is going to leave those crazy 1960s Timothy Leary, Grateful Dead values behind, that whole kind of rave, artistic, possible world, and we're moving into the stock exchange. And we're going to start mining human attention for its money. And you can go to this day, you go to Stanford University, there's a whole department called Captology, run by a guy named B.J. Fogg. And Captology, like the word suggests, is about capturing human beings. That's where they came up with the streak feature for Snapchat, so that the 12-year-old girls want to make sure they have a connection with their friend every single day to get that number up. And once you're up to like 200 or 300, if you miss one day, it goes back down to 0. That's captology. It's taking the science of behavioral economics and applying it to interfaces. Captology is where they go to Las Vegas and get the algorithms from Las Vegas slot machines and use those in our social media feeds. But captology is the study of algorithms. How do we write algorithms? It's funny, in the old days, we called algorithms were called intelligent agents. The idea was that you would launch, as a user, you would launch an algorithm to find out all the different things you want and bring it back to you, like your little intelligent agent. Now, an algorithm is something that we program in order to look for exploits in human beings in order to get us to do things that are against our best interests. That's what machine learning is for, not just to predict us, but after they've predicted the most likely thing for us to do, then they must make damn well sure we do it. So on Facebook, it's not just that they're looking at what we do. Who cares what they know, right? It's what they do with that. It's what they do with it. So if they know and usually they can get about 70 to 80% accuracy in their predictions. If they know with 80% accuracy from the data I've left behind that I'm going to go on a diet in the next month, what's going to happen? My news feed's going to start to get stories. Oh, look at this fat person who died from being too fat. Or look inside the veins of somebody who, you've all had that experience where you've typed in a search somewhere and then your news feed starts to fill up with all that stuff. Now, why are they doing that? They're not doing that to sell me a particular brand of health food. They're doing that to make sure I act in accordance with my statistical profile. They're trying to get the 80% accuracy up to 85 or 90% accuracy. And the way they do that is by going to the 20% of people who are going to do something else and getting them to behave the way they're supposed to. Because this 20% of anomalous behavior, these are the weird people. That's the strange stuff. That's the people we couldn't predict. And to my mind, those 20% are the interesting people. Those are the artists. Those are the weirdos. Those are the innovators. Those are the people from whom the new ideas are going to come from. But we're trying to shave them out of existence. And it becomes almost part of our culture. Right? We use Autotune now, even on real musicians, good musicians. We're auto-tuning them. Could you imagine taking James Brown and auto-tuning him? It's like he's reaching up for the note or coming down in over the note. No, let's quantize that. Get him to hit the note exactly. What are we doing? We're shaving off the soul from the music. We're literally taking that away. What do the computers call that stuff? Noise. He's off the note. It's noise. What do we call it as artists, as humans? That's the signal. Right? The computer can hit the note. James Brown can only reach up to the note in the way that he does. That's the human being communicating through the song. Once we're auto-tuning him, he's no longer the message. Right now, he's the medium. He's no longer the figure. Now he's the ground. And that's what happens whenever we use one of these now. You're not the user of your smartphone. I like to say, you're the product or whatever, but you're the used. Every time you swipe on your smartphone, it gets smarter about you, and you get dumber about it. And if you want to get smarter about it and deconstruct it and look at the program, you're going to see that the algorithms are hidden in black boxes. They're protected by proprietary law. You're not even allowed to know what your phone is doing to you or how it's doing it to you. That's who gets protected. And what are the phones actually trying to do? If you go to BJ Fogg's classes at Stanford, you'll find out. It's to get around our frontal lobe and reach right into our brainstem and get us to act. Algorithms don't appeal, not yet anyway, they don't appeal to your higher thinking. That's not the way to get people to do stuff. The way to get people to do stuff is to scare them, or seduce them. Basically, blood or porn. Or bloody porn, which I'm sure there is, right? And it's to stimulate back here. It's to get your reptile activated. And all of these technologies then, instead of opening up the possibilities for this crazy, higher, more evolved, connected self, they're about atomizing us. Because you're much more likely to respond with fear, like a little reptile, impulsively, with your brainstem, if you're alone. That's the way advertising's always worked. Even television advertising is the blue jeans commercial says, wear these blue jeans and you will get laid, right? That's the main communication of any blue jeans commercial. Now, who is that commercial for? The person sitting on the couch next to his girlfriend? No, because he's already getting laid. The blue jeans commercial is for the person sitting alone on their couch, not getting laid. Wear these jeans and then maybe it'll happen for you. Right? But the function of advertising and advertising culture is to keep everybody apart. That's why we all have our own television station now. We all have used to be one TV in the living room of the house, and then everyone got their own cable channel, or now their own YouTube individualized, well, that's a whole other story, where that takes you. But our technologies are developed now in ways that prevent us from establishing rapport with one another. Even if you use, these nice little applications like Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and all, and you see the person there on the other side of the screen, but you can't see if their pupils are getting larger or smaller as you speak with them. You can't see if their breathing is syncing up with yours. You can't see the flushing of their face change. All of these painstakingly evolved social mechanisms for establishing rapport, they're thwarted in a digital environment. So the person on the other side might say, yes, I agree with you, totally, 100%. You turn off the computer and your body didn't get it. Right? You didn't establish rapport. The mirror neurons didn't fire in your brain. The oxytocin didn't go through your bloodstream. So the person agreed with me, but I didn't really feel it. And that generates distrust. They said they agreed, but I don't really believe them. Your body doesn't know to blame the medium. We don't know that. We didn't evolve to know media might create a distance. All we know is something is wrong here. And then that distrust feeds back into our general distrust of other people, making us more likely to promote this individualistic, competitive, digital capitalist nihilism that we're living through today. And we're happy to do that. And this has been a long time coming. This dovetails much too neatly with the origins of the scientific method in the the early Renaissance, I guess. Francis Bacon, when he was introducing science and cause and effect science to the world, he said science will let us grab nature by the hair, hold her down, and subdue her to our will. It's not just subdue nature. It's like also grab her by the hair, right? Just make sure everyone understands this is rape, right? We're not just, so we're going to rape nature. We're going to hold her down and subdue her to our will. All those dark, crazy, weird places and feminine things in the moon and the woods and nature and all that, we're going to use science to quantize every little bit, to quantify every bit of it, to shine the light of male reason on all these weird, dark, wet, weird, strange, unpredictable places. Because it feels safe to these guys, right? And that... well, it obviously feeds back into libertarianism. It feeds into this idea of controlling everything, but it even feeds into the mindsets of so many people who want to now make technology better for us. There's a movement, and I gotta love them because they're trying to do the right thing, but they call themselves the humane technology movement. We're going to make technology that doesn't harm people so much. But even that construction, humane technology, it reminds me of when you buy a dozen eggs from cage-free chickens, and they say these chickens were raised humanely all the way to the slaughter. So it's if humane technology is still looking at human beings from the perspective of the technology, not how are people using tech, but how is tech using people. It's a reversal of figure and ground, where we are not the user of the tech. We are the thing being worked on. Just like nature, just like all the indigenous peoples that we went and took over. What I'm trying to fight is this very West Coast American but widespread belief that evolution is some battle for survival between individuals. And that somehow justifies this cutthroat ethos of the marketplace. If you go back and read your Darwin, not that he was right about everything, but if you read Darwin, page after page, he's not talking about competition between individuals. What he's talking about is cooperation and collaboration between species and interspecies cooperation in order to ensure mutual survival. I remember when I was taught evolution in middle school, in 6th or 7th grade, they told me that trees compete for the sunlight. Did they teach you this? The trees compete for the sunlight, and the big tree that gets closer to the sun will shade the little tree, which will then wither and die, and this one will succeed. Turns out that's not true at all. The big tree is sharing its nutrients through the soil, which turns out to be alive. It's not just dirt. Through a matrix of mycelia, of mushrooms in the soil to the little tree through the whole summer. Then when the big tree loses its leaves in the winter, the little tree, which tends to be an evergreen, shares its nutrients back with the big tree. And the mushrooms, they take a service fee for the transaction. So we're looking at this giant collaborative, cooperative enterprise. Evolution is a team sport. That's why I keep talking about Team Human. That Team Human is a collective sport. And that's what early digital culture was doing for us. We were all isolated, individuated, and alienated from television culture. Then along came digital and the net. Digital was what? Digits. These are the digits, the fingers. Now we're no longer just receiving media, now we're making media with our fingers, whether we're making weird, cool digital things like back there, or whether we're just on the keyboard, actually writing. It's almost back to the manuscript era. It's not even in printing press, we're using fingers, we're back connected to it. And we got an organismic sense of who we are. We thought the internet is going to be kind of a test run for some kind of shared consciousness, for some new organismic sensibility. I mean, and we got rave as a kind of a social centerpiece. The rock and roll guy on the stage with the long hair, with the sort of masturbatory guitar solo, that was gone. And the DJ was anonymous. An early rave, you didn't even see, you didn't know where the music was coming from. There was no person. The DJ went into the background and the subject was us. It was the organism. It was all the people dancing on the stage, high on E or not. I mean, the best thing about the ecstasy at a rave was not that it got you high, it's that it kept the rave illegal. And because it was illegal, it couldn't be digested by mainstream culture. It allowed it to stay alive as a counterculture for just a little bit longer. And I remember there were days you'd be at a rave all night, and the next morning, you go to work and you're walking around in downtown New York or San Francisco, and you'd see someone else that you might not recognize specifically, but when you make eye contact, you just know they were there. They were there. They were at that thing. It was like part of this conspiracy. Today, when I walk around in New York City, if I just find someone else who's not staring at their phone and make eye contact, I feel like I'm in the conspiracy with them. There's another one. Right. We're alive. You're alive. I'm alive too. What's going on? I don't know, man. Good to see you. Found one today. I try to get at least 3 a day. 3 humans. Right? And that's the conspiracy. But what the word conspiracy from Latin, what does conspiracy, conspire actually mean? To breathe together. To breathe together. It's funny. Originally, I thought of the internet and digital technology would be like the safe space for the counterculture to go while the yuppie scum controlled the earth. Now I feel like they've all gone online and the real world is where we can do the conspiracy, where we can breathe together. The corporations are all on there. I just want to go and then unplug them and and off they go. But even for us, even in those of us who make art and technology for social good, the temptation to make an acid test is really high. The temptation to think, I want to make people feel like that and make people feel like that. Or even rhetorically, and I fall into the same trap. I want to write a book that gets people to blah, 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 blah. That gets people to like each other more, that gets people to celebrate their humanity. Once I'm thinking in terms of I'm going to write something that gets someone to do something, I'm playing people again. Even if it's for good, I'm still manipulating. I'm looking for control of others. And that takes the focus off the people figuring things out with each other. Yeah, so what I'm looking at is the way that we surrendered the potential for deep cultural transformation to growth-based capitalism. And I get it. It's hard not to do that. And it's partly because of the way technology was first rooted when Vannevar Bush, I don't know if you ever read that essay called As We May Think by Vannevar Bush. It was sort of the first vision of computing. He wrote that essay for the Atlantic magazine, but he really wrote it for Dwight Eisenhower, who was president of the US right after World War II. The US had a problem in that all the places that we tried to take over, in England too, all of the colonies, they were pushing back. So how was our economy going to continue to grow if all these places like Rhodesia were becoming Zimbabwe and didn't want to be exploited actors anymore? Whether we used Bretton Woods and World Bank and all that, it was still coming to an end. And Vannevar Bush said, don't worry, even though the physical space to colonize new places may be running out, computing can open up a new landscape, a new set of territories. And that territory turned out to be human attention. That territory turned out to be us. So what we're really doing with digital technology is taking that same colonial drive, right? To conquer people, take their stuff, enslave them, to treat them as objects and expand our economic empires, and turning it on ourselves. That's why you finally see white privileged men saying, hey, wait a minute. Because now they too, we too, are subjects of colonization. We're colonizing ourselves. And we end up then with this very necessarily anti-human ethos pervading technology, pervading the internet. You know, the ethos that art, hopefully, is here to countermand, to counteract. But the capitalists will tell you, these digital capitalists, that any art that leads people to think, any book that slows someone down and makes them reconsider, that's the problem. That, wait a minute, you're slowing down. I was going to give a lecture to some tech developers at Cornell, and when the professor saw the thing I was going to say, he said, don't say this to them. It's going to slow them down. They've got to get their projects done by the end of the semester. If they pause to reflect on the social, cultural, economic, environmental impact of their technologies, they won't get them done. So instead, they take this exponential view, where they say that technology will continue to grow exponentially, just like the market. The problem is nothing in nature grows exponentially. The only thing in nature that grows exponentially is cancer, and then it kills the host organism. Right? We can't, humanity, nature, the planet is not compatible with this exponential growth. Even the market is not compatible with exponential growth. Do you know the New York Stock Exchange was purchased by its own derivatives exchange? Do you know what that means? The stock market, which is already an abstraction of the market, which is already an abstraction of human needs, was purchased by its abstraction. It was consumed by its own abstraction. That's how digital exponentialism works. We move into increasingly abstract versions of ourselves. Now, some of the technologists I run into say, Doug, that's not the problem, that's the solution. The problem is the humans. That humans have to accept that thanks to digital technology and its exponential ability to get really smart, to have thinking machines and general machine knowledge and AI and all that, that human beings should accept that all we really need to do now is pass the evolutionary torch to our successors. That it's time for human beings, we keep the lights on for the computers as long as they need us, then fade into oblivion and accept our inevitable extinction. I was on a panel with one of the singularity guys who was arguing exactly that. And I said, no, human beings are special. We're weird, we're funky. I used David Lynch, actually, that human beings can watch a David Lynch movie, not understand what it means, and still experience that as pleasure. Computer can't do that, right? A computer needs a 1 or a 0, an answer, a resolution. Human beings can sustain paradox. We can live in the liminal place between the yes and the no, the 1 and the 0, and hold that as long as possible and experience that hold as pleasure. That human beings deserve a place in the digital future. And he said, oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're human. Right, like it was hubris. And that's when I said, fine, guilty. I'm on team human. I believe that human beings deserve a place in the digital future. And it doesn't mean I'm anti-technology at all. I'm not saying, it's funny, I used to be the guy making people less afraid of the digital technology that was about to come. That was my main job through the 90s. To translate the digital future for people who hadn't experienced yet. And now I feel like my main job is reminding people of what life was like before digital technology, what values we're leaving behind so we can retrieve those values and embed them in the digital future before they're gone. And those are deeply human, communal, connected, indigenous, circular, sustainable values. Pedal to the metal, expansionist, exponential growth is not a good strategy for a sustainable planet or the human biome or anything like that. No, instead, the idea I'm trying to promote, one of Team Human, is not Team Human against Team Algorithm, but that being human is a team sport, that you can't be human alone. There's no such thing as an individual human. If the internet hinted at some kind of collective Gaian awareness, that's fine, but that's not the real one. This is the real one. That's a way of seeing it. That's an architecture that can remind us that we're all part of the same thing. And that it is time, I believe, it's time not for a revolution. That's what we got. The digital revolution, which just changes a few of the elites at the top, but the system stays the same. Instead, what we need is a renaissance, a rebirth of these old ideas in a new context. And we see the old ideas trying to come. We see it in Etsy and craft beer and Burning Man and Game of Thrones and fantasy role-playing. And we see all of these tropes, these kind of medieval tropes, the things that got repressed in the last Renaissance. Women, collectivism, local currency, the commons, all of these mechanisms that we had for engaging with one another, these deeply human, scaled mechanisms for engagement and mutual prosperity, we're seeing hints of them, right? And the trick is not to quash them in favor of a revolution and a bunch of billionaires who are going to try to escape from the rest of us, but rather to be able to reacquaint ourselves with our shared collective humanity. All of these things that we're playing with and that you're all playing with in this room, social media and phones and lasers and fractals and holography and immersive sound and VR and AR, we can use it for discovery, and participation. We can use it to break the trance. That's not entertainment, right? Entertainment, again, back to the Latin, entertain means what? To hold within. That's what entertainment is for, to hold somebody in. That's not what art does. Art does the opposite of entertainment. Art breaks them free, right? It shatters the illusion. It challenges the consensual hallucination in order to offer people other alternative reality tunnels. And in that process, teaches people that they're creating their reality tunnels all along, right? You give them a practice in an art exhibit of reality creation. They should be able to leave it not just able to recreate the reality you made, but now any reality. Oh my gosh. You mean I'm making this up as we go along? Yes, we're making this up as we go along. Reality is open source. That's what we got from the original net. Rather than closed endings, we got open endings. We got the infinite game. We can make things with empty sensory calories, right? Or we can create social nourishment and help people recalibrate to their own humanity. The world may be ending, right? Isn't that weird to say that without being some crazy religious person? Right? The world may be ending. Greta is in New York explaining what we're supposed to do about that. Music and technology, art, computers, they can contribute to that destruction, or they can create or recreate a culture that helps us retrieve our social reality and then build on that together. Okay, we got 15 minutes left. Let's talk amongst ourselves. I came all this way. You probably have questions and thoughts and things. Thanks for all coming in here. It's very, very sweet. I love it here. And open-minded Amsterdam. Thank you. I know I threw a lot at you, but there's a lot to say, and it's Holland, so you guys can handle it. You've been reality creating for a long time here. This is well, do you have thoughts? Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk. What do you think about acid communism?
Acid communism?
Yeah.
I don't know about acid communism. I like both. I mean, if I had a thing, it turns out, I was doing a talk for like smarter people than me in Germany, and a guy got up, and he was like a doctor professor something, right? You know how they have a doctor professor, and he goes, God, sir, you're an anarcho-syndicalist. And so that night, in the hotel, I went to Wikipedia to find out what that was, and I was like, that sounded cool. So if I'm anything, I mean, not that that's the same terms, but anarcho-syndicalism really sounds good. I think they started killing people, and that would be the bad part. But the idea was that the way the economy should work is with a whole lot of small cottage industries networked together. It's sort of distributism. You don't grow a business larger than it needs to be in order to serve its function. And right now, of course, we're growing business for growth's sake because companies, the only product most digital companies have is their stock. That's the thing they're selling, not their goods or services. So they need to grow for growth's sake. But I defer in some ways to the Catholic priests when they were analyzing communism. After Marx, the Vatican was asked to weigh in on communism versus capitalism. And they came up with something called distributism. So they said that rather than redistributing the spoils of capitalism after the fact, the way you do in communism, let's pre-distribute the means of production. So the implication in a digital age would be platform cooperatives. What would Uber look like if the drivers owned Uber? So then instead of just training their robot replacements, which is what they're doing now, they're doing research and development for a company that they themselves would own. And that's just such a better model. But acid communism, I guess doing that on acid, right? Basically? Yeah. If it's a cool thing, sure.
Right.
Yeah?
No, so the term comes from Mark Fisher, who had this famous quote that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. I guess he's kind of hinting at the fact that it's, media has made it somehow implausible to imagine anything else that could be governing the way that our systems work,
Right.
and maybe revisiting the 60s in the sense that you create a new image of society that doesn't end up in some kind of mindfulness escapism
Right.
that Timothy Leary sort of drifted off into after detaching himself from any kind of clear political framework.
I mean, in a way, I would, it's almost, especially if we're in an arts context, an easier frame to use for this is less economics than narrativity, right? Since Aristotle and the Poetics, we've been looking at a kind of a male orgasm curve of narrative, right? Crisis, climax, sleep. That's, the male orgasm curve of theater, of drama, of everything, of capitalism, of Christianity, that we ache for conclusion, right? And what we need to do is certainly by retrieving the female, the feminine archetype, and the feminine narratives, you realize, it's not about stories that end, right? It's so much easier. We ache for conclusion. We'd rather see the end of the world than not know how it's going to turn out. The billionaires I was working with, in their bed trip, they prefer to see the end of the world that they can prepare for than to try to imagine, what do you mean, it just keeps on going? Yes, it keeps on going. Sustainability is about you're alive and you stay alive and you don't know. And you, instead of having answers, you get wonder. So that's sort of, I'm feeling like that's an easier place in than the economic argument. How do you compel people to wonder, to be okay not knowing? Then they don't need, it's funny, they watch Walking Dead in America for a feeling of reassurance. That's a positive fantasy for people, right? Their phone's not ringing, there's no Twitter, there's no one looking at their old emails, there's just nothing. It's just your family, slow-moving zombies, back to nature, right? And it's easier for people to imagine the zombie apocalypse than 3 years from now, what's the world gonna look like? That's more unsettling to them. So they'd rather get, they'd rather believe God hates them or something and the world's just going to end than how are we going to make it work? And that's a sign, just of immaturity, but I think it's the kinds of narratives we've been using, which is why I'm so interested in theater and film and Lynch. I mean, Lynch does not tell you how the thing fucking ended, right? He keeps you stay. It's, oh, I get it. And to be able to tolerate that is so hard in a society where we're given answers, You're never asked to sustain something for more than 20 seconds anymore. I don't think we dismantle that narrative so much as help people tolerate new ones. Tell different kinds of stories. I mean, the kinds of work that you see here. It's, what is this? What is it? What do you mean, what is this? I'm not going to tell you what it is. That these are very, for the most part, these are very open-ended. I mean, that's the moon, but right, clever. But it's not really the moon now. It's another one. But art that doesn't give you the answers is the way you slowly build up people's a tolerance for that. We're seeing it. We're seeing it. I would love to see a generation of filmmakers follow Lynch and Kubrick, rather than Spielberg and Zemeckis. Right? Nothing against anyone. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you very much for this lovely
you.
talk. Just a short question. How optimistic are you that we will be able to reclaim those and retrieve those values that you're talking about?
I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful. I mean, everywhere I go, I find people who do resonate with that. A lot of people in the closet who have these kind of positive, open-ended values. And I think that I think it's very possible. The question is whether I'm almost more concerned with the pragmatic reality of keeping people alive and how many people can we sustain and what happens as we move into nationalism. And I mean, boy, nationalism and digitalism, they're so abstract, they're so not real. They're these artificial boundary states as compared to, that's why I'm glad you're from the city. Cities are real, cities are organic, cities are like termite mounds. They're groups of people working on things. Nation states were, clever idea, but they're not real boundaries. They're political. But I think I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful. If you get this kind of the difference, I have hope. I have hope that the new generation understands that things are different. They're a pragmatic bunch. This next, and they're going to have to be. But about bringing pragmatism to reality, but then infinite vision to one's art and craft is kind of the fun balance. I think we'll start. We'll see.
I wonder, where can we sign up for Team Human now?
Uh-uh.
What are the communities, platforms, ideologies, if you will, that really reflect your vision?
Well, you're Team Human. I mean, you're on Team Human, and anyone can be Team Human if you're just a member of the human race, right? It's funny, a lot of people have asked me to make an official Team Human thing and official Team Human meetups and all that. And that's, again, there's enough organizations out there. There's enough places to go. And I would rather us take the kind of Team Human ethos into the organizations that we're already a part of and humanize them rather than create, separate groups. So, your local school board and land use board and old age homes and neighborhoods. And I mean, you find it everywhere, And I mean, on the back of the book is the phrase. It's a Timothy Leary phrase: "Find the others." I put it there rather than quotes. The idea: find the others. And when Timothy Leary meant it, it was after it was interesting. It was after a very similar question. He was giving a lecture at Berkeley in 1968, and a young woman said, "I've just done acid for the first time. I've seen how the whole world is connected and everything. What do I do now?" And he said, "Find the others." Which is cute, right? Find the club of other psychedelic people and get with them. And for me, find the others actually means, no, find the others. Find the people who are not there. In America, the ones wearing the Make America Great Again hats. Find the people who believe really crazy, fucked up shit. And try to establish rapport with them. see where's the fear that's underneath the hate and try to address that and help them through that. It's really tricky to see the humanity in people who are doing dastardly stuff, but it's there, right? They're just acting out. But I mean, there's a ton of things. I'm big on Extinction Rebellion right now. It's sort of I would have, if this were 1992, I might say let's just join cool arts cooperatives and let's do a Team Human meetup everywhere. But now things feel so urgent that I'm sort of directing my communal energy towards, climate change activism. It just seems like such a, so yeah. And if you hang out with the Extinction Rebellion people, they're all cool and occult and incarnate, so it's a good place to start.
What do you think about the Prakana's book, The Future is Asia?
I mean, I haven't read the book. And it's, sure. Certainly Asia's future is Asia, and you could also say the future is Africa, right? Africa's got the fastest growing population. It's going to be, 4 billion by, when is it, end of this century? It'll be like half the planet. Now, I do think that right now there are 3 spheres of influence defining sort of our planetary system right now. There's the West, there's China, and there's digital. And we're looking at how those 3 sort of, it's just a kind of a 3-body problem is working itself out. And even those 3 leave out, half the population of the planet, the whole south of the equator population. But it's interesting. I mean, and it's an interesting, a long, interesting discussion on what happens to the West on digital and what happens to the East on digital. And they both respond differently. And we're looking in the East now, they're retrieving the Tao and Confucius in public school in China, but we're not retrieving Aristotle and sort of Western origins in our schools. So it's interesting to see whose civilization will end up embedded in the digital future. Right now, America's civilization, or the West civilization, is not represented, which is part of why we're struggling. Our economic model is represented, but not who we are.
Hi, thanks again for your talk. I want to come back to a subject that I already opened in the afternoon. And it was funny that you mentioned Extinction Rebellion, because my question, in preparing, I was just opening something about that. One of the founders of Extinction Rebellion, Gail Bradbrook, describes that she had an experience with ayahuasca, a strong psychedelic, that really made her very sure that she needs to become more active. And in a recent article from August, she even calls for a mass psychedelic disobedience. Would you agree? Do you see a path there? How important do you see that? And how can it really be effective on a massive scale?
Well, I mean, I love Gail. She did a Team Human interview on my podcast when those first bridge protests were happening. Not everything is right for every person. So what I might get from a psychedelic experience, someone else might get through a magical ritual, and someone else might get through meditation. So I wouldn't say that psychedelics have a one-size-fits-all. It's kind of industrial age thinking. I remember, the first time you do acid and you think, let's just give it to the president and the world will change. And it would, but it's a setting also matters, and different people are going to have different things. I don't believe a psychedelic experience is a prerequisite to organismic understanding of the planet, as many an indigenous culture will demonstrate. But sure, I mean, when you're sick, you take medicine, and if we're sick, that could be, one of the good medicines that we try to see outside our self-interests towards more collective understandings. A lot of people, when they do these when they ingest these plant teachers, It's not just their own brain they hear, but it's as if they're hearing the plant talking at them. They have personality in a way that, say, a synthetic psychedelic like LSD doesn't speak at you. It's more of like a psychotherapist, just You take, ayahuasca, and it's like, oh, whoa, the earth has a voice. What's she want here? Oh, I'm killing her? Oh my God. So it's a different experience. But no, not everyone has to have that to be on the team and to.
We have time for one last question. Oh, a lot of hands and two questions. Is that okay for you?
Please, whatever you say.
Okay.
Thank you for your talk. It's quite weird after listening to a lot of audiobooks to see you here. My question was, what do you do personally in your civic life, and how do you organize your own personal, align yourself with your values outside of teaching?
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard. So teaching, that was one of the first things I did when I decided I wanted to be more real and more local, was, I started teaching at the city university rather than, some Ivy League institute. Go and talk to real people, first generation, the first people in their families who've ever gone to college, and, engaging in a real way with that. Otherwise, it's hard. It's hard to have time. I'm trying to raise a child. I'm trying to have enough money to live in America as someone who's not going into advertising. And it's hard. As you all know, it's hard to make a living without doing fucked up things. So I've gotten myself to that place where I'm not actively doing bad, right? Which is a start. But now it's like, this is one of the last times I'm going to be in Europe. I'm accepting that reality that, can't come here twice a year and fly to San Francisco, and you just can't. It's just not right. So trying to get places to let me do Skype talks and things like that instead of coming live. And locally, it's, joining not the school board, but going to school board meetings, volunteering to teach math to kids and after-school programs. For me, it's very local, because I'm already doing kind of this scaled up, whatever this is, publishing and podcasting and documentaries and all, more than enough for any person. The other thing I'm doing is trying to use a digital term, pivot. I'm trying to pivot away from globally scaled media into doing local theater. And partly it's to set an example too, to say, look, I've made my poop, now get off the pot and let somebody else sit here for a while and let them poop. You know what I mean? I've done it. And I'm saying that just so I'm not elevating the work that I'm doing. It's just my fertility, right? That's my growth conduit. It's the best I could do, but enough already. So I did my podcast, and that was a way of saying, okay, I've got an audience. So how do I turn my audience into an opportunity for other people? So use my platform and let every voice on there, a different person. And that's it, and scale back. In some ways, what I'm thinking to do is to disappear. Not die, but just demonstrate that it's really okay not to be famous. So many kids now think if they don't get, 1 million Instagram clicks or something, that it hasn't happened. If a tree falls in a forest without 10,000 viewers, without a Facebook live stream, did it really fall? It's like, yes, it did. I believe. Anyway, so it's that. But yeah, it's hard. Carbon, I'm looking at my carbon footprint. I look at my slavery footprint, which is just as scary to look at. Don't buy another phone. The most energy efficient phone, whatever you can have is the one you have. And then if this one breaks, see if there's a semi-broken one in the closet. This is where they send kids into the caves to get the rare earth metals. And there's a great website called slaveryfootprint.org, where you can see how many slaves are working for you, and it's kind of frightening.
I think we should accept that we have more questions than answers, and we have another program running in the other venue. So I just got a phone call. We have to finalize this session. Thank you very much, Mr. Rushkoff.
Thank you. And thanks for the art. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you all.